Once again, it is August 16th, 2016. We are in the home of Ron Whitlock. With us today is Ron Whitlock and Gary Wombles. These two gentlemen went into the Marine Corps together in 1968, I believe. 67 as part of the buddy system. They served in the same unit in Vietnam and were wounded on the same day. And so we've done their stories individually. Now we're going to put them together so we can have a group conversation. So Ron, we spoke with first, said that the decision to join the Marine Corps was yours, Gary. Tell us a little bit more about the two of you talking it over, knowing that you were probably going to go to Vietnam, and how you told your families that it was your joint decision.
Well, let me see if I can remember all this. That was several years ago. We worked together. We grew up together, but as we were in high school, we went to different high schools, but we worked for a contractor over in Beech Grove, building apartments and stuff like that, which was a friend of Ron's. Ron went to church with him, and he got me the job over there. But as the summer went along, and we're both trying to figure out what are we going to do, military came up, and I had made up my mind before my senior year of high school that I was going to go into the Marine Corps. My dad was in the Marine Corps in World War II, and it just seemed like that was the transgression that I was going to, go. And so we just kind of talked about it, and I don't know if I don't think I twisted his arm all that much, but I actually signed up a couple days before he did. And then we talked again, and he went down and signed up, and so the rest is history, I guess.
And we rode motorcycles together, and we'd been called in for the physical, but not the official draft, and we knew we were on the lottery list. And one day he comes by on his motorcycle and says, would you like to join the Marine Corps in a buddy system? I was super intelligent, and I said, sure, and we went downtown. What's amazing is, though it was a day or two later that you had already been down there, our service numbers, Marine Corps service numbers, were like mine was one number and his was the next number. It is amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. I still remember his service number because it's only one or two numbers different from mine, so that was kind of cute.
Both of your families had a history of military service. Both of your fathers served in World War II. What was the reaction among family members when you told them?
Go ahead, Ron.
Well, I hadn't told my dad, and the Marine, I remember they gave us a bumper sticker or something, and I put it on the window of my car. And I was pulling out of the drive, and my sister tells me that Dad said, "What's that on Ron's car?" She said, "I think it's a Marine sticker." And I think Dad knew. So when I come back, whatever I was doing, came back home, Dad said, "I want to talk to you." Said, "Did you join the Marine Corps?" And I said, "Yes." And I think it initially probably disappointed Dad because he was Army, and I had talked about wanting to be in the airborne, that sort of thing. But on the other hand, I think he was proud that I was going to serve. And but it was a tense time. He never really talked to me a lot. He wasn't angry, but he didn't talk a lot about it. The only thing he said was, 5 minutes after you get into your training, you'll probably regret what you've done. He was right. That first night, I just laid there and almost wanted to cry, because it was pretty rough when they got us to boot camp.
Yeah, I had told my dad prior to me signing up that that's what I wanted to do, and he was apprehensive, and I'm sure it's because of he knew what was coming, down the road. If you join, then you're going to end up being in some combat. So he was pretty nervous about that. But I didn't tell my mom for a couple of days after I joined, because I knew it was going to, she was going to be supportive, but it was going to break her heart, you know. And sure enough, she had a tough time with it for a while. But you know, mom and dad were both very supportive. My sister was supportive. You know, my sister was 4 years younger than I am. But I don't know. It was just one of those things. Just another stage of life. You know.
When you went off to boot camp and you go through training, hardest period of your life, very rough first day. Did knowing that you had a friend in boot camp with you help, or was there a sense of competition between you two, or how did that play out?
I don't remember there being much competition, and like I was trying to outdo him. Or Ron was an athlete. I wasn't. You know, Ron was a wrestler. He was a state champion wrestler, so he was much more athletic than I was. So. But I was smarter than him, so it all worked out all right. So there wasn't much real competition, you know, I don't think. But it was very comforting for me to know that Ron was there, you know. And we weren't in the same squad in boot camp. We were in different barracks.
No, we saw each other a lot.
Yeah.
But it was different because I had a friend, and I don't ever remember competition. That's, well, how did you do in this, or. It really was comforting that there was somebody there I knew. We talked about family, you know, we'd meet he'd introduce me to guys, I'd introduce him to guys. And so there was a great camaraderie there, you know, and it was good to know I was going through with somebody that I knew very well.
Were you surprised to find out that you would both be in the same combat unit in Vietnam?
That I was shocked, because I actually, what they tell you when you join on the buddy system, what the recruiters tell you, and we all know recruiters would never lie. They tell you that you go through boot camp together. After that, all bets are off. You know, because at the end of boot camp, they determine what your MOS is going to be. You know, and it just so happened that we were both so high intellectually that they put us in the as grunts, I guess. So we ended up going to ITR together, and then we came home on it was Christmas leave. We got what did we get 10 days or something like that. We came home for Christmas, and we went back. I figured that'd be the end of it, and we just stayed together. You know, we went to Okinawa together and staging, and then we went to Vietnam. So I was very pleased, but I was totally shocked that we were together in all the way through like that.
I was similar. It was kind of shocked that we went together, but it really was a neat thing that I thought that we were together even in Vietnam. But in the Marine Corps at that time, there was a guy between us in alphabetical order. And they would count off 1, 2, 1, 2. All the ones do this, all the twos do that. We always were the same number because that guy was between us. And so even Okinawa, when they put us there, and Vietnam, we got there, 1st Marines, 3rd Marines. And it was 1, 2, 1, 2, 1st Marines, 3rd Marines, 1st Marine, and we ended up 3rd Marines. Yeah. And they put us as the replacements that they flew in the helicopter to the unit. Same platoon, but different squads.
Yeah.
So I was really, but it was kind of neat that almost every day, not every day, that we could get up and see each other.
Yeah.
You know, and talk and see what was going on at home, and did you get a letter?
Yeah.
Did you, prior to Foxtrot Ridge and the events of that day, was there any anxiety? Anxiety may not be the right word, but apprehension on your part that, well, if something bad happens, two guys from the same town, our families, you know, did any of that thinking kind of modify your actions, or was it just you had a job, you did your job?
I don't remember that it did. We did our job, and I don't remember worrying a lot about, was Gary okay? Because we were in a lot of firefights, until that
Yeah.
action on Foxtrot Ridge. And but you know, we would talk. If we got together, we'd talk about the action or something like that. But a lot of times, my squad was off somewhere. Your squad was off.
Right. Yeah,
So-
you do squad patrols sometimes. You know, his squad would go one way, we would go the other. But usually at night, you know, you were back at the bivouac area, all at the same place or something like that. But I don't remember. I can remember being concerned, especially if we were separated. If one squad was over here, one was over there, and you took some fire. Not immediately during it, but when it was all kind of over, before you get back together, I'm thinking, man, hope Ron made it through that okay. Hope Ron was okay. You know, but can't say that I really worried about it or it changed anything, because you basically you had to concentrate on your job, and job one was to get through the day. You know.
The Marine Corps, in all branches of service, there's a camaraderie, there's bonds that form, especially I think in the Marine Corps. Do you think that your childhood bonds, your bonds of friendship, transcended even the bonds of the Marine Corps? That now it's hard to form that into a question, but did you feel it more acutely when you thought Ron had been killed and all other cares went out the door except for worrying about your friend, and vice versa?
Yeah, at that point, that was as low as I've ever felt in my life, I guess. And I don't necessarily think it had anything to do with the Marine Corps. I mean, my concern at that point was for his loss, me being personally losing him, and what it was going to do to his family, you know. And at the time, I didn't think about it, but I look back and I'm thinking that I was afraid that they were going to think, well, Gary's the one that talked him into this, which I really didn't. I mean, you know, Ron decided on his own. I brought it up, but he would have eventually anyway. So.
Yeah, that's right. There was a bond greater than just being in the Marine Corps, because we did a lot together growing up. I mean, vacations, camping, jobs. And he didn't have any brothers. I didn't have any brothers, so we were almost like brothers, you know. So there was that kind of almost connection that was really strong. Lots of concern in that. You know, one time, you probably don't remember, because it was so hot, we were all about passing out, and we'd put our backs to each other, and that time we happened to they'd say, take a break, big heavy packs on, and you'd just kind of sit back to back with each other, so you had somebody to lean up against. And I remember Gary talking about riding our motorcycles, and I thought you were just talking about it, but the heat had gotten to him.
Yeah,
And I can still remember almost a panic mode when the guys were pouring the water. You know, what they do to kind of help you from a heat stroke or whatever it was you were having. And the thing was, even though that happened to you, it didn't make you weaker. I remember seeing big orange spots in my eyes because it was so hot in the jungle, and we were moving in the mountains, and that was probably a panic moment, because I'm thinking, you know, is he going to be okay? And you know, if that happened to other guys, you would say, I hope he's okay, but there wasn't that panic in you, you know. And so that was probably the first moment. But at the ridge, when I got wounded and at the top, and I asked how the guys were down, and they said, I don't know if anybody's down that can get out of there, because you guys are pretty pinned down. And I was already wounded. Two guys had been killed right next to me going up the hill, Gunny Ziegler being one of them, and Sergeant Whitted was trying to help pull me over the bank of that bomb crater, and was shot. And so my mind was, this is pretty devastating, and I didn't know if he got out or not, and then found out he didn't. He thought that I'd been killed, and so it was at that med unit that we saw each other. And what I do remember that he was in a lot of pain. I'd been already given some shots, so I was feeling pretty good. And I'm kind of a humorist, I guess. You know, you say dumb things at the wrong time. And I just remember when they brought you in, and he was in a stretcher, and they were setting him in there, and I saw him, and I yelled. And you kind of looked up, and I said, "We've taken this buddy thing way too far."
Yeah.
That was my response. And he didn't grin. That was the thing. He didn't laugh at all. And I'm not certain I did either at the time. It was just a dumb thing to say, I think. But there was a rush of relief. And there again, lots of guys been killed, guys were wounded, and it was just a rush of relief to realize that he was wounded, but he was out of there and okay.
Yeah, I feel the same way. The relief that I felt whenever he said what he said. Like I said, in my mind, I thought he had said, quiet down there or something like that. Because I was sobbing. I knew I was sobbing. I was in pain, but I was hurting because I'm thinking my best friend is gone. So I was in such a state of shock. I wanted to get up, but I wasn't going to get up. They wouldn't let me get up, but. Yeah, I don't. The friendship was stronger than the camaraderie. I think it maybe grew stronger because of the camaraderie and what you went through. But
in the aftermath of Foxtrot Ridge, and both of you are wounded, and the emotions, the swing of emotions you felt both ways. Did either of you then, or in hindsight, think that maybe the buddy system wasn't a good idea? Because if one of you were lost and the other wasn't, what effect would that have on you and your families?
I've had people ask me that before, or if you had it to do over again, would you do it? And I'd say no, I would do it. I think it was a good thing. I think it was extremely unusual. I'd be curious to find out how many people actually went to combat together. In the buddy system, because we were in boot camp with a couple guys from Illinois, Miller and Wright. They had joined on the buddy system, but they didn't serve in combat together. But to me, it was a positive thing. It was a coping mechanism that other people didn't have. I felt like it was an advantage.
Mm-hmm. I'm the same. I didn't regret going in on a buddy system. If I had to do it over again, I would do it again. Because that's a good word. It's coping. It was a good coping system because you had this guy you really knew and knew each other, and I think it, when we went through training, it wasn't competition, but it was encouraging because you accomplished, and so I was going to accomplish. That we got through it together.
Yeah.
And so it was a good experience on the buddy. And I don't know of any guys either that went in on the buddy system. And those two guys, Miller and Wright, we went through training together, but one was put in one company and the other one was put in our company. And they weren't in combat together.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a unique situation. I don't know I've never heard of anybody else going through it. But actually, when we got wounded, I still got a clipping from the Indianapolis Times. It's long gone by now, but they had an article in there about us that we had been wounded on the same day. So it's kind of neat to go back and look at that stuff. But it was a major support thing for me. So I think it was a good thing.
And your stories parallel each other. Trained together, served together, wounded together, and then they do diverge. And you talk about the coping methods and coping system, but when you both went different directions, how did you react?
How did we react together? You mean to each other?
Yeah, how did you react to missing your buddy, or you and Ron were separated? How did you cope with your injuries and recoveries?
When I first got to Camp Lejeune, I thought about Ron, but we didn't really write letters to each other, and I don't really know why that is. I mean, you're so close, and then the day we got wounded was the last time I'd seen him until just before we got discharged. When he got sent down to Camp Lejeune, he was an MP in the brig, and I was in 3-6. But I think we went to a movie together, or maybe went out to eat together or something. Once he got into, but then he got discharged before I did. I can't say that we lost touch, but there wasn't that close communication, and I personally didn't have that close of communication with anybody. I mean, you know, you make new friends with your new unit, but you stayed at arm's length. You didn't really want to be friends with anybody. I mean, really close friends. At least I didn't. I don't know about Ron.
It's I think when Gary went to Camp Lejeune, you run into a couple of guys you remembered and knew that we'd served with, but I never did. There was never a closeness with anybody, especially when I went back to Vietnam and became a squad leader. I was a squad leader, but I couldn't hardly tell you the names of the guys that I was squad leader over at that time. And I look back now and think psychologically, what's going on? I think it was a coping mechanism that I wasn't going to get close to anybody anymore. And the same thing when I went to Lejeune. I mean, I did my duty, I had friends, we did stuff, but I couldn't say I really had a buddy, you know, somebody you were really close to. Got guys I became friends with, but just never did. And I think the experience of being so close to the guys we served with, and then they're killed, and the emotion that, you know, that just rips you apart. And so you just kind of back off from that and stay arm's length from being real buddy-buddy with somebody.
Yeah, I actually, when I was stationed at Lejeune, I ran across Corporal Walsh, who was my squad leader. Was very instrumental in keeping me from calm, I guess, down at the bottom of that ridge. And we talked for 10 minutes, but it just didn't seem the same, you know, and I've not seen or heard from him since, you know, but there was that one time that I ran into him, just haphazardly ran into him down there, and but we didn't think, hey, we got to get together and go to lunch or go to dinner or go to a movie. It was, we talked and then we separated, and it's hard to explain. You're so close, but yet you don't want to touch, you know.
I think maybe that's the mysteries of the mind. It starts setting up defensive walls like, okay, those are painful memories. Even if you like that person and that person maybe saved your life, we're going to wall that off to keep you from touching that again. Yeah. And, you know, so you were discharged in 70, 46 years later, here you are sitting together. There's a story there about how the two of you came back into contact. You moved to Texas, and reconnecting and rebuilding those bonds of friendship. How did that happen?
Well, I'm not sure if I can go back into all that. I mean, Ron moved around, you know, with his ministry. He was in Arkansas for a while, I think, and maybe Illinois. Were you in Illinois?
Started in Illinois,
and then ended up in Texas. But when he would come home to visit the family, we would get together. And he'd come over to the house, you know, him and his wife, so we were still friends, but it was like I had my life and he had his life, you know, and I still thought just as much of him then, but we just, I don't know if it was because of the Vietnam thing that you didn't want to talk about it too much. I don't know. I can't explain it, but it's been great since he's moved back to Indiana. We don't see each other every day, but he was instrumental in getting me to go down to Mitchell, down to Smitty's grave down there, and ended up meeting his Smitty's family, and actually got to meet his daughter. You know, where all I'd ever seen was a little picture of her being a month old or something like that. So Ron's more outgoing than I am, so he twisted my arm and got me to do some of that stuff, which has been extremely helpful to me. You know, I'm glad he moved back to Indiana.
It's the Smith family, this Buddy's family, I think has been instrumental in helping us to more so reconnect. And it wasn't that we were not friends. I think we went different directions. We lived our lives, and I think the Vietnam. This is my perception. I think the Vietnam experience at the time when we come back made it so we were friends, but we didn't want to have to keep resurging that, regurgitating that over. And so we didn't get together that much except when I came back. But I look at my dad, who every year met with the buddies he served with.
Yeah.
And I remember being in our home when I was growing up, and they laughed and they talked and they told their experiences, and we didn't do that.
No.
And it wasn't because we weren't friends. I think it was the scar that came with serving there at the time during that period. After the Gulf War, everything changed, and it was after the Gulf War when we moved back here that we connected with the Smith family. We started reconnecting. We were able to tell our stories. It was just, it was a different period of time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I never wrote friends that I served with because I just didn't get that close to them. And there's a few that we have connected with just in contact, but not really a friendship. So this has been good for us to not only be back together, but to be able to freely feel like we can share our stories,
Yeah, we can talk about it now and not worry about conflict, having pain. That I'm causing him pain, or he's causing me pain. We've gotten beyond that. I think where it's a healthy thing now. Was 20 years ago it might not have been. Maybe it would have been. Maybe we should have done it 25 years ago or 30 years ago, and everything would have been better. I don't know, but it's. Like I said, you can talk about it now and not have to worry about how's this going to make him feel,
I think unfairly, because of the way you were received home and the way society at the time, up until the Gulf War and even beyond a little bit, viewed the Vietnam War veterans, and they closely associated them with the war, and the negative connotations that we as a society had to get past that kind of denigration to our veterans and welcome them home. And that broke open, I know, a lot of the conversations that I've had with the veterans as well. And so now we can have these conversations where you're working with Gulf War and Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, and you're ministering to them and trying to heal them, maybe through your own experiences, help their healing process accelerate so that they don't go through 30 years or 40 years of silence and, unacceptance of them as men and veterans. So,
well, there was a patriotic furor. Maybe furor is not the right word, but with the Gulf War, it was more like the World War II. It's like the country got behind this instead of opposing it, and that was a very positive thing, and it had a positive effect on me as a Vietnam veteran. Like I said, I was a little bit jealous, but I was also proud that the country had learned learned a lesson from the '60s. Well,
I touched on everything, but if you gentlemen have anything you'd like to say, or Richard, if there's anything I've missed, we're here for you, and you've invited us into your home, and we want to give you the opportunity to say whatever you'd like to say.
Well, I'd like to thank Ron and Eunice for allowing us to do this up here. I mean, I lived down in Indianapolis on the south side, but it was very convenient, and but I appreciate Ron and Eunice letting me come in here and mess up their house instead of my house. I know my wife will really appreciate that too.
Well, it has been, I think, tremendously therapeutic to be able to do this that we're doing nowadays. And I think of other guys that need to do this.
Yeah.
Need to tell their stories, and because it's not only our reconnecting, it's our feeling comfortable to be able to talk about it that we didn't so much before.
Yeah.
And this reconnecting, not only in this, but I mean, I poured a concrete pad out here, and Gary helped me, two 67-year-old guys doing it, and we poured concrete 50 years ago. I mean, of course, he did it, but I didn't. I'm a preacher, And I'm thinking back, boy, we really have reconnected.
Yeah.
Telling our stories, doing that
Doing that little concrete project out there, yeah.
It's come full circle.
It has.
This
Any
really
friend you can call up and have him move yards of concrete is a good friend.
Well, the concrete was more painful than this, I'll have to say that. I was hurting pretty good.
We appreciate you guys doing this. I don't know. Richard, do you have a card?
I don't.
Okay. You've got my contact information.
Right.
If you can think of other veterans that you think, maybe they've got a unique story they'd like to share, or you think would be beneficial. We're still doing stories of service. I think we are. Are we?
As far as I know.
Okay. Hopefully. And there are other institutions across Indiana and historical societies that would love to sit down. And that's, I guess, my advice is people like us who haven't served need to be able to go to veterans and say, I'd really like to hear your story. Would you like to take the time to tell us? And so maybe we can do that together. It'd be something we can get the veterans to tell their stories and help them heal also. So thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.